And then I am not afraid to lay it out to them that this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I will tell them that straight up. I'm like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it is the most rewarding thing I have ever done.
I'm like, what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's the doubt for? Live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'm a living, I'ma live it to death. So what's the dream of? What's the hope in? What's the doubt for? And live to no end. This is living. The life I've been given is a gift. If I'm a living, I'ma live it to death. Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody to the call. Living Hope Agency, Living Hope Live. Excited to have our special guest on here tonight, Miss Casey Traut, brand new senior sales manager of FFL Zealous, and she is a $50,000 a month producer with a pretty cool background. She came from a background of, she was a collegiate athlete, cheerleader, and I'm very excited to hear her story and just some tips because she's an absolute beast on the phones, beast in the homes, and she's just got a huge heart to serve people, and you guys will get that through this call. So Casey, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Jamie. You really are a hype man. I'm doing good.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's just give us, I don't want to dig into your story too deep, but why don't you give us a little bit of your background, what you were doing before Family First Life, how long you've been here, and just kind of what it's been like for you so far.
Yeah. So like Jamie said, I was a collegiate athlete. So anybody that's in Arizona, I cheered at Grand Canyon University for 4 years. Loved it there, but then obviously, you know, you can't be a collegiate athlete your whole life. So after that, I had worked for a cheerleading organization since I was like in high school for like the summers. I had an opportunity to travel and do different leadership positions there. So I did that right after I graduated from college, and then was just looking around for a job, had networking connections, and did marketing and business development for about like 6 months. And it was for like a small traffic engineering firm. And I quickly realized I'm not a 9-to-5 person like at all. And so it was super cool how that all ended up panning out. But basically my boss was like, I think, you know, do you like working here? And I was like, does it look like I don't like working here? It's like, cause that's a problem. So, but all that being said, she was like, I think you're meant for so much more and other things. Little did I know, like this sort of thing was coming up in my life. And so I was like, okay. So that all happened around when COVID started. So COVID started and I had just stopped working there. And then I started to like interview. And of course, like being a freshly like graduated college person, I'm going up against people who've had like 20 years of experience that got laid off from their job, and now they're running for the same thing as me. So all that to be said, I looked for a job like all of 2020. And then I had Nina Damjanovic reach out to me on LinkedIn as, you know, I'm sorting through looking at what I want to do. And she had just asked me if I like had ever thought about getting my insurance license. And in the back of my brain, I was like, nope, it's like not really at all. And so then basically just from there, that was 2020, so like the end of 2020. So I've been at FFL since December 2020. So I'm rolling into my 10th month, which the renewals are going to kick in. So that's great. But that's basically like the gist of how I got started with FFL, and I've been here ever since. So.
Okay. And I know you won't do this, so I'm just going to do it for you. But just a little money drop, just so people understand there's some credibility here. How much would you say ballpark you've had deposited in the last 10 months?
Oh, actually deposited. Well, according to the company, I'm at about like 260,000 right now. So
10 months.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane for your first year with no experience whatsoever. So guys, you definitely have somebody here that's worth listening to. Your highest issue paid, I think you're a little bit over 50K for a month on your own personal pen, right?
Around there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's just dig into it. Let's just get started. New people on here, they're maybe nervous to get started. They're nervous to, you know, go from dipping their toes in the water to diving in. What's your advice to them?
Give yourself a non-negotiable for 90 days. You're not good at anything your first 90 days. You're just not. If you've ever tried anything new, especially something that's, you know, this is high level sales, like it really is. So this is like the elite of the elite when it comes to insurance sales. So when you're timid to do anything, you naturally don't do as well as you could, because you're thinking in the back of your brain, how do I not fail? And so you're thinking the opposite of what you should be thinking, of being like, okay, what can I possibly do to succeed here? So that's what I did. Was I was like, I'm not giving myself another option. The first 90 days, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to ask a boatload of questions. I'm going to get good at this. And hopefully it's not going to take me 90 days to get there, but give yourself a non-negotiable time frame, because if you're kind of half in, half out, I don't know if I can do it, I don't know if I can do it, like your strongest thought is going to take hold of you. So if you're saying, I don't know, and like you're not sure of yourself, then that's going to be presented in the home when you talk to people. You've heard the phrase fake it till you make it, and that's kind of just what you have to do. If you don't really know what you're doing, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to fake it, and then I'll call people to help me. So biggest piece of advice, make it a non-negotiable for like 90 days. Ask Jamie and whoever else, like top producers, a lot of questions. Despite what you may think, they will actually be incredibly helpful, and they want you to ask questions.
So like what advice was given to you when you first got started? Obviously you started fast, you bought a lot of leads, you dialed the phone, you set non-negotiables in regards to how many appointments that you were going to set. And then obviously you went and sat with them. I guess, what was your experience in like the first, let's say 30, 60, 90 days? Obviously you had some failures. You had some quick successes as well, but like it's a little bit of an emotional roller coaster for that first 90 days, and it's an emotional roller coaster for the whole journey. You just get kind of a little bit more level when you're riding the emotional roller coaster. So I guess what was that first experience like, and how do you I guess stay level when you have a great day and then you have a bad day, and then you have a great week and a bad week, then you have great week 4 weeks in a row and then a bad week? How do you stay level with that?
So biggest thing with staying level with that is just, I've heard it time and time again, like just base it off of the numbers. So when it comes to back to your first question of like first 30, 60, 90 days, yes, I had successes. Yes, I had plenty of failures. So, when it came to that, I knew at the beginning I wasn't going to be as good as like a Hayden or a Jamie, or like I knew that. And so I just was like, okay, what can I do to make this happen? I was like, at least break even. So that's like where my brain was going. I was like, at least break even. You can do that. Like just sit with the right amount of people. So I pushed and pushed and pushed. So the first 30, 60, 90 days, I was in the Arizona office every Monday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. And I was typically one of the last ones out. Because I was like, this is what they tell me I have to do. Like, if I don't have my appointments, I'm not as good yet. So like, I have to go and make sure that I'm getting enough on the books to where I can actually make the amount that I need to. So first 30, 60, 90 was especially like that. I was like, I just have to do exactly what they say, because for some reason, like it works. So that's what I need to do. But as far as like the emotional roller coaster, he's not wrong. It's okay to remember that emotions are normal. However, if you let emotions run your life, period, and you've probably all experienced that at some point, it doesn't typically end well, because you're making an emotional decision where emotions are pretty temporary. So when it comes to something like that, I'll even be honest, I just rode an emotional roller coaster recently. I was like, oh boy, I was like, here we go. But when it comes to that, it's really important to have someone in your corner. And that doesn't need to be family or a friend. That can be Jamie or Mike or whoever that you look up to from a top producer standpoint, because I've even had like Hayden is like one of my people that I go to, and he pours into me when I'm like feeling doubtful and whatever. So the biggest thing that I would say when it comes to like riding the emotional roller coaster, just work the numbers. That's exactly what Jamie's going to tell you too, is like, if you have a week where you only book 20 appointments and you did like, and then you had one where you did 30 and you did your normal, he's going to say, okay, well, how many appointments did you have? So it's like, so that's the reality. And I have to check up myself on that too, because sometimes I have a low week of numbers and I'm like, what the heck? So biggest thing with the emotional roller coaster is just make sure you're going back to someone like Jamie or Mike that's going to speak life into you. And whoever else, is a top producer on your team, because they will encourage you and remind you of like how well you're doing, and really just to ride it all out. So
100%. I think it's important to focus on the law of large numbers. And the law of large numbers says if you do something long enough over a certain period of time, a ratio will appear, and you'll start to see, okay, if I sit with this many people, this is how many appointments that I set. This is how many appointments that I close. This is how many clients I get. If I dial this many, you start to see this ratio that starts to appear, and this business becomes predictable. And I think it's important to note that, even when you have a bad day or when you have a bad week, if you keep working the numbers and you don't look at everything on like a really micro level, but you zoom out and you look at it at a macro level, I've had so many bad days. I don't even want to admit how many bad days I've had. I've had so many bad weeks, you wouldn't even believe it. But I've never once had a bad month at Family First Life, because the law of large numbers always works in my favor. Because, one point I remember I was feeling a little bit down with a bad week that I had. I had a really good couple of months, then a really bad week. And then I wanted to give myself perspective. So I sat down and I pulled out all my dial trackers, because I'm just super meticulous about keeping track of my dials, how many appointments I closed, how much premium, it turned into. And, I'm not going to go through the deep numbers with you guys of how much I had closed over the first 6-month period, but I sat down and broke down my first 6 months. And when I broke it down to how many appointments I set versus how much premium I sold, every single time that I set an appointment, I made $200. Okay.
Right.
So this was whether I sold the appointment. This was whether the appointment told me to pound sand at the front door. This was whether, I sat with the person and got all the way to the end of the, they said, think about it. The person called me and rescheduled or canceled when I was on the way. I made $200 for every single appointment that I set. So for me, I started to think, okay, last Saturday I went out and I booked 10 appointments for the day and I went 0 for 10. But did I really make $0, or did I make $2,000 if I'm looking at the law of large numbers? So from the law of large numbers perspective, it's always going to pay me out in the long run. And I always like to say, and so many of us do, the field owes me. And when you look at it from that perspective, you realize if I just keep working the numbers, I look at it as if I set the activity, I had a good day, regardless of the results. If I did the activity and I keep doing the activity over a long period of time, a ratio will appear and the field will always pay me back for the work that I put in. So
Right.
that's typically, my perspective when it comes to the numbers. So let's dig into a couple of other things. So this business, it's 3 basics. It's buy leads, dial a phone, go and show up at the home, and just care for people. So let's just kind of dig into each one of those. What kind of leads you working?
So predominantly, it's mainly CRM, like obviously some like final expense here and there, whether it's Game Time or like EverQuote or whatever else, which is still kind of like internet leads, but mainly just the CRM.
Okay. So some people, they'll go into the CRM and they, you got people like Josh Williams, where his entire team, they buy 1 month and 3-month-old internet leads and they absolutely crush it. And then you have some who go in and they buy, brand new internet leads and they say they suck. So what's your advice to somebody in perspective on just leads in general? What's your advice to somebody who maybe says, I bought a batch of leads and it didn't work out? What would be your line of questioning that you maybe ask them?
Let me see your dial tracker.
Mm.
So let me see your dial tracker. If I see that you did 50 dials and you have however many leads, like that sheet better be full. And then the next one better be full with notes all over it saying what they said, why they didn't you got to track that stuff. Cause then sometimes even everybody's had a bad dial day. Jamie's had a bad dial day. I've had a horrible dial. Like it happens. And sometimes you sit on the phone, you're like, am I even a good producer? You know what I mean? You're like, what the heck? So with that being said, when it comes to buying a batch of leads, sometimes you are going to get the people that are like, I didn't like fill that out. And genuinely, maybe some of them didn't, like they were looking for auto insurance. I don't know. That's not all the time. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, you've got to look at it at, again, a law of large numbers and just work them. Also, what I have to remind myself, don't get emotional. Chances are Sally Sue is not ignoring you. She's probably in the middle of grocery shopping and a random number called her 3 times and she doesn't want to pick up. Doesn't mean they don't want to talk to you. Sometimes I've had people curse me out on the phone, hang up, and I call them right back. And I'm like, I'm trying to help you. And they're like, oh, and they calm down because they just are getting called. And don't get me wrong, people that are older get called by Medicaid, all these other people. So it's not just life insurance people, it's all these other people that are trying to bombard them with other stuff. So if you buy a batch that's not exactly working out in your favor, the next thing I would say is, even though you're dialing and you're pounding all day, well, there are doors and you have knuckles. So go knock on the door. And what I'll use is fast people search, true people search. If I'm in the area, people are typically a lot nicer when you see them in person. If you catch them while they're home, and because you are genuinely trying to help. That's sometimes what I have to remind myself is when someone makes you feel bad about calling them multiple times, whatever, yada, yada, doesn't matter. You are genuinely trying to help because they did ask for it. So even knocking on their door, being kind of hey, I'm the underwriter. they're the one, they send me out when you don't answer your phone. And so does this look like the correct information for you? You know, whatever. And most of the time they're going to be pretty nice. So biggest thing I would say is look at your dial tracker. Are you tracking? I put circles in places that I talked to someone, they answered the phone, didn't book them. And I put why. Hung up before I got done talking, lost him at this, whatever. Then I boxed the ones that I got right with an X, whatever. And if after looking at your dial sheet, you'll see, you can even break down your ratio of like, okay, maybe I closed 30% on the phone, which by the way, if you're doing internet leads is actually really good. You only need 15. You only need 15 yeses. Zach Twardowski said something on a call one time that I was like, oh my gosh. He said, I'm looking to actually get 150 no's. Like that's what his mentality was. And for us, like me thinking about that, I was like, no, 150 times. You know what I mean? I was like, shoot. But he's like, I only want the 15 or 20 yeses. So if I got to bulldoze through the no's, okay, yeah, I got another person to call. And then he's actually tallying his tallies for the day of his no's. So it rearranges your brain of like, okay, I actually need to get this many no's before I like get a yes. So that being said, it really is all numbers. Make sure that you are actually doing your due diligence of dialing. You're the only one that can actually say you have integrity and say you did it. And if you have a question because you keep getting an objection, I've called Jamie in the middle of dial day and I'm not even on Jamie's team. And I'm like, okay, so this happened and what would you have said? And half the time he's like, Casey, that's what I would have said. Stop. But with that being said, I did that all the time when I was new too. So I would call someone and be like, I keep getting this same one. Like, how would you say that? Instead of doing the same thing I was doing over and over that wasn't working, I would get multiple top producers' opinions and I go back to dialing. So that's kind of how I would say if you get a bad batch of leads, sometimes it happens, but again, there is one good one in there. Even if you find one, you knock on one door and you sell for 1,000, you just made all your money back, all of it back. So
100%. I think it's important to keep that perspective. If our average commission here at FFL is $1,100 and you buy 100 internet leads for $1,100, all you need is one. So if I dial the phone from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to book my 15 appointments and I just show up, I'm probably going to sell 2 or 3 just for showing up. And I know that some people, they hear that and they're like, what do you mean I'm just going to sell 2 or 3 just for showing up? You have to understand the nature of our clients and you have to understand the nature of our process is that this isn't a super hard sales opportunity. And our goal is to reduce sales pressure as much as possible. And like 1, 2, 3 times out of 15, people are literally there with their check on the table, their driver's license, and they're there for you to take their order. And that might sound crazy to someone who hasn't made a sale yet, but if you set enough appointments, you'll realize that if you show up to some, they literally have all of their information on the table and they're just ready for you to tell them what's the best fit for them. Then you've got 1, 2, or 3 out of those 15 that will never buy from you, no matter who you are, no matter what you do. They're just having a horrible day and they're never going to buy no matter what. And then you have that middle group of people. That's where skill set starts to come. And that's where improving your ability to overcome objections, improving your ability to relate to the client and, guide them through the process and figure out why they filled it out. That comes in the middle. But you're going to have people, if you just show up, you're going to get sales. You're going to have people, if you just show up, you're not going to get the sales. And you have people that you have to work at it. So, anybody can show up and they can close 15, 20, 30% of the people that you sit with just by showing up. To get to that 50, 60, 70 range, it's going to take some skill. And, it's very rare that you're going to have somebody that closes 100% of the people that they sit with. It's just, it's abnormal if you see that happen. So, I think it's just important to keep that perspective, because if I have 100 leads and I get 15 people who tell me to come over, 85 people told me not to come over or didn't answer the phone. And most people who are struggling will focus on the 85 people that told them not to come over. They won't focus on the 15 people that told them to come over. They also won't buy new leads the next week. They'll focus on how can I get a hold of those 85 people from last week versus just buying a brand new batch of leads. And if they understood, if they would have just dialed the crap out of that first batch, got their 15 appointments, sold, 4 or 5 appointments, made 5,500, reinvested another 1,000, done the exact same thing. The other 85, it doesn't really matter. You hit those people up when you have time in between appointments. So I think it's important just to have that mindset when it comes to leads. Let's talk about the phones a little bit and we'll dig into the in-home. When it comes to the phones, we won't dig into your phone script super deep, but what are just some tips and tricks that maybe you do on the phone, things that you think that new people, they maybe forget to do, or things that just you think are super important for being able to book an appointment?
don't pause. You hear Jamie never pauses until he wants them to speak. And so that's a big thing, because I was training someone else who was new on the phone, and every time they like said something, they were like trying to be polite with the other person on the end of the line, but they're going to hang up. So it's all about control. You don't have to be mean on the phone, but you do have to have control. So not pausing is huge until you want them to speak. So you are trying to make sure you're getting all the information across in the first like 3-4 seconds of who you are, why you're calling. Is this your correct address? That's the first time they're speaking. So
Let's do a quick example of that. So I know I didn't think we were going to go into the script, but we'll at least do the first couple lines. Let's do an example of you pausing, like just being an awkward new producer versus you powering through it like the veteran producer that you are.
Okay, which one do you want first?
Let's do the pause just so people can see what that sounds like.
Okay, ring ring.
Hello.
Jamie.
Yeah, who's this?
Jamie, this is Casey. I'm a local field underwriter here in Maricopa County. I just is 1234 Main Street your address?
Yeah. What's this about?
So this is the form that you sent in looking for life insurance programs.
Not interested. Click.
Oh, yeah. So that's what happens.
So now when you listen to her do this again the next time, the difference is when you pause, you give opportunity for the client to speak. The 2 times you want the client to speak is 1, when you're saying their name in the beginning and they're confirming that it's them, and then 2, when you're confirming the next piece of information. So let's give the difference. Let's do the other one.
Okay. Ring ring.
Hello.
Jamie.
Yeah, this is Jamie.
Jamie, this is Casey. I'm actually the local field underwriter here in Maricopa County. I was just getting back to you about that inquiry that you sent in for the life insurance program. So I'm not like the sales lady. My job was to find out if I had your correct delivery info. I had you at 1234 Main Street. Is that current or is that old?
Oh, that's current.
Okay, awesome. Then I have a date of birth is 12/24/1974. Does that sound like you?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. So now it's like once you do that, now at that point, she can slow down. So it's like when I get past that first piece of confirmation, okay, Casey, yeah, most people fill these out because they want to make sure they can leave money behind for their family. Is that what you were looking for, or something different? Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Most people, what the problem that they have is that they'll pause and they're waiting for the client to like urge them on, like, hey, this is Jamie calling you about that life insurance form that you filled out. And then just like, they're waiting for the client to be, yeah, I remember filling that out. Thank you so much for calling me. You should come over tomorrow at 3:00 and book the appointment for them. But that's not how it works. You have to remain calm and in control. And it doesn't mean that you have to go fast, because if you notice the second time that Casey did that, she wasn't going that much faster than the first time. She just didn't pause in between sentences. So, Peter Unger, he says, breathe, but don't pause. When you have a period in your script in those first 3 sentences, breathe in between, but don't pause. Keep going. Most people that, hey, this is Jamie giving you a call in regards to life insurance. I'm just the local underwriter who's been assigned to get that packet out to you. I just need to confirm that your address is 123 Main Street, versus this is Jamie giving you a call about the life insurance program that you requested here in Lynn County. I'm just the medical underwriter who's been assigned to get that packet out to you. I just need to confirm a delivery address, 123 Main Street. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. So not pausing. I mean, especially when you're tracking your dials, like Casey talked about, you should talk about when also is the client hanging up on you. Are they hanging up in the beginning of the call? Are they hanging up in the middle of the call? Or are they hanging up at the end of the call? If they're hanging up at the beginning of the call, I can just about guarantee you're pausing. There's not really many other things you could be doing other than pausing. So what else would you give advice wise on the phones?
The biggest thing, I know it's easy to get nervous over the phones. Talk to them like they're a normal person. You know what I mean? Like, they are people. So like, if you're thinking so hard if I have to overcome, like I've done that too, but like, think of what would naturally come out of your mouth when someone says, I'm not interested, and you're trying to sell something. So, but again, reducing sales pressure. So I'm not interested. Yeah, perfect. No worries. Like, it's just my job to get the information out to you. What you do with it, completely up to you. And I think I'm missing it on here. Are you currently a smoker or a non-smoker? So the biggest thing I will say is after you say an objection, go right back to your script, wherever they interrupted you at. So if someone says, what is this about? Again, at the beginning, I'm like, okay, most people fill it out because they want to make sure that, God forbid, they pass away. They're not leaving that burden behind for funeral and final expenses, yada, yada, whatever I say. Then I'm like, is that what you were looking for? Something different? Yeah, that's what I was looking for. And even if they're about to say, but I am like, okay, I just wanted to make sure date of birth is da, da, da. So I'm going right back to what I'm supposed to be saying. So that's my second tip is when you're overcoming action, go right back to exactly what you were doing. So booking it or whatever.
And the way that you did it was you looped back by asking a question. So it's like that's the key. So it's like you can loop back, Alex Straight does the AAA method. It's like, answer, or acknowledge, answer, ask a question. Okay. So if you guys are writing notes, that's a good one to write down. AAA, acknowledge, answer, ask a question. So I said, I'm not interested. And Casey, she overcame the objection. She acknowledged that, perfect. I totally understand. I'm not really that interested to get this out to you either, but they require me to. Overcomes the objection by answering what the objection is. And then she says, I just need to make sure, are you a smoker or a non-smoker? And then she's right back on track with asking a question. So that's just a very easy key. Anytime that somebody takes you off track, when you're asking questions, you're in control. If they're talking and they're asking questions, they're in control. So one last thing when it comes to the phones. So some people, they have trouble booking instant internet leads. If you ever have somebody who's just like super pissed off on the phones, what is your go-to for somebody to reduce sales pressure if they're just like super pissed off because their phone's been getting blown up because they filled out multiple requests?
I put myself in their shoes. If someone's blowing up my phone and I get frustrated with someone, and if someone on the other end was like, hey man, I totally get it, I would instantly calm down. Because that's not a salesy thing. A salesy thing is you're going to bulldoze through and just not listen to them. Then they're going to hang up. So when someone gets that frustrated with me, or they're just frustrated, I'm like, hey, have you kind of just been bombarded by calls? I'll literally say that. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, dude, I get it too. And I'll literally say that. I'm like, I get random phone calls to my phone too, but I'm the local gal. So I'm the one who handles all of these requests in this county. I just wanted to make sure I had your correct delivery address. 1234 Main Street. That's you, right? Or is that old? And then they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's current. Okay, great. No worries. And I had a date of birth is da, da, da. So calm them down. They're on a high horse because they're just annoyed. It's not you. They're just annoyed by everyone that might have called them. Like I said, they get called by who knows. So acknowledge again that they're frustrated. They're not mad at you, or you as in Jamie or me as in Casey. They're just frustrated. So if they're frustrated, okay, stop calling me, and they hang up, first of all, I call them right back twice. And if they pick up, sometimes do, I'm like, hey, I'm the local gal. My job is to help you. I'm sorry if you've been getting a ton of calls. I just had to make sure that the information does get out to you that you were looking for. So is this the correct address? And then you just go back to it and be like, okay, great thing is these are non-medical programs. That means no blood, no urine, no needles. Okay. So all that they make me do, shoot me out there, ask you a couple questions, check your ID just for your safety, make sure you're not on oxygen, strapped to a hospital bed. That's not you, right? Then they kind of start to laugh. No, that's not me. Okay, great. So just keep it easy. If you got called, think about them. If you got called that many times and someone, even though they're genuinely trying to help, they're the seventh one to call and you've picked up the phone every time, just think of how you would want to be treated on the other end. So it is still your job to get the information out to them. That is correct. But it's also your job to read the situation. You can't read body language, but you can sure as heck read tone. So just read basically how they're talking to you and calm them down.
100%. It just comes back to, again, increase credibility, reduce sales pressure. Everybody else who's calling that person when it's an internet lead is calling from somewhere in a call center, somewhere in the country. You're probably the only local person that's actually going to come out to them and get them the information, or you're going to do it over Zoom, whatever. You're the local person. You're not this person who's just across the country in a call center. And you got to keep that in mind. Grady said this to me one time, or maybe it was Andrew. They said, the ones that are the easiest to book are generally the hardest to sell. And the ones that are the hardest to book are the easiest to sell. And I think that's super important because I know, at least for me, whenever I have a pissed off internet lead, if I'm able to reduce sales pressure and book that appointment, I almost always know that I'm getting a sale. And the reason is because if they were that hard on me to get in the door, they were that hard on everybody else. And there's no way that anybody else got in that door except for me. And I'm probably the only experience that person will ever have with life insurance again. And I keep that in mind. And when I get there, it's like, they're so thankful that somebody came to help them. But so many people, they get discouraged when they get somebody who barks at them on the phone. They put their tail between their legs and they say, okay, have a good day. And they hang up. And I think it's important to be able to just be relentless on the phones, to not be afraid to get barked at a little bit, not be afraid to reduce sales pressure with clients. And if you're able to overcome that, you're going to get into so many homes that you would have normally not gotten into. And that's where the big premiums are. Whenever anybody tells me, oh, I don't write any big premiums on Insta internet leads, I'm like, well, you're not booking the ones you're supposed to book. Because if you booked the ones you were supposed to book, that's where the huge premium is. So let's dig into your in-home and then we'll take some questions. So let's go from the front door. You knock on the front door and all the way through setting the table. Just walk us through that.
Yeah. So most of the time I don't like ringing the doorbell. It's like very salesy, but I know like maybe if they're older and I'm like sitting there knocking and they're like not, then I'll ring the doorbell. But like when they answer the door, I'm asking their name just like I am on the phone, Jamie. And then they're like, oh yeah, this is okay. Awesome. This is Casey. I'm here for our appointment. How are you doing? And they're like, oh, good, whatever. And then typically asking, is this a shoes on or shoes off kind of home? Because you obviously want to be respectful. You are going into their home. They're allowing you into their home. And so, you do that. And then I immediately look for a table. Obviously some houses that you get in, they're not going to have one, and that's legitimate. So if there's not one, you still make it known you are in control. Hey, I need a table to write on. Is this the best thing? And I'll point to like a nightstand, and they will go up, dust it off and get it for me and bring it to me. So then I'm like, that's me stating I'm the professional here. I'm trying to help you. And I can't sit on the couch with my hands in my lap and just sit there and write. So that being said, I'm always looking for a table immediately, and I'll point to it and be like, is this the best one to sit at? I need to write. And so then as I walk in and I like sit down, I'm pulling up. So I don't have like the paper leads. I just screenshot it on my iPad and then I flip it around. And so then I like show it to them like, okay, so other than if you told me some different information on the phone, because let's say it's the wrong address on there, they typically point it out. So I'm like, other than if you told me different information on the phone, this all look correct. And then they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, so then I start asking a boatload of questions. I'm not moving on to show them my license until I've heard a why. You will not sell if they don't have a why. You just won't. So people don't get life insurance for no apparent reason. Like they're typically doing it for an emotional reason of trying to protect someone. So with that being said, I'm like, okay, so like, Jamie, what pushed you to fill this out? Did someone recently pass away? Or are you just realizing now it's time to get this kind of coverage? Like, why did you request this information?
Yeah. My wife's father just passed away in an accident.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay. Did he have any coverage like this in place for himself?
He did not.
Okay. So are you and the wife kind of digging to figure out money to make that happen?
Yeah. And obviously we just had a newborn. So we just want to make sure the family's taken care of. If something happens to me, I make all the money.
Okay, got it. So then you're more worried about you. So with the father, was he like being buried, cremated? Do you know?
Cremated.
Okay, so just to educate you, on average, cremation is anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000, which I'm assuming you're starting to figure out.
Yeah, we figured that out. We had to pay for it.
Okay, so with that being said, Jamie, you're just trying to make sure, God forbid anything happens to you, because you said you make all the money, correct?
Yeah, my wife stays at home.
Okay, so does your wife work at all? Like,
no, she just takes care of the baby.
Okay, so God forbid anything happens to you, she's really in a pickle.
Yeah, I mean, she could always go back to work, but we obviously have a child care, the whole deal.
Right. Okay. So with that being said, so like basically that's he pulled out a strong enough why. So I would move on from there. But if someone was doing something like, I was just looking into it.
Yeah, I just want quotes, Casey. That's why I filled it out.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, I'm the field underwriter. So my job here is to help you figure out what you do and don't qualify for. Because Jamie, to be honest, I'm not sure if you know this, there is a difference between quotes and actually qualifying. Are you aware of the difference?
No, I just thought that whatever I get quoted for is what I can get.
No, so companies are showing you on average a very like healthy young person when they're showing you quotes. They always have to take into account it's not fair if you're 50 years old and just had cancer to give you the same price as like a 24-year-old that's completely healthy, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm assuming that. So insurance is something that you have to qualify for, you can't buy. So with that being said, it's my job to help you figure out what you do and don't qualify for based off of like your medications, that sort of thing. So that's my job today. I know you're looking for kind of just quotes. Have you been shopping around? Have you shopped?
I've just filled out a couple of forms online.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
saw
And
and I saw that I saw this commercial where the insurance was $9.99 a month for 250,000. That's what I'm looking for.
try not to break character, but I will literally say that that's a real thing. Okay, perfect. So when it comes to that, was it Colonial Penn?
I'm not sure. It was the one that's on after Wheel of Fortune.
Okay, gotcha. So with that being said, Jamie, that insurance works by units. So it's per unit. So $9.99, if you're like 50 something years old, you have to think about it per unit. So it's about 1,000 per unit. So it'd be $10 per 1,000. So do the math with me. How much is $10,000 worth of coverage?
$100.
You
Yeah,
got it. So
got it.
that's how insurance works. Now, with all of these programs, good thing for you, I'm an underwriter and a broker. So that means I'm not biased to any one company. I do the shopping for you to help you figure out what is really going to be best for you and your family. I don't have to go with any one. Now, with that being said, they're all state regulated programs, meaning even though these are A+A rated carriers and they are the best of the best, they're regulated by the state. So that means they can't be above a certain pricing and it will all be in the same ballpark no matter where we apply for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and get started. And then I would have shown them my license before that, but that's how I would have done that if someone's just looking for quotes, or I would have asked, why are you looking for quotes?
I'm just getting up there in age.
Okay, so you're getting up there in age. So if you don't mind me asking, Jamie, what has taken you so long to get this coverage in place?
I've just been procrastinating.
Okay, and why have you been procrastinating? Like, what has pushed you to this point where you didn't, like, why haven't you decided this before? Why did it make you procrastinate?
I just don't really like thinking about death.
Okay, so well, good news is after we talk today, like I said, I am an underwriter and I work with a ton of different companies. We're going to help you figure out what you do and don't qualify for. So after we figure that out, you won't ever have to talk about it again. Sound good?
Sounds fair. Cool. Good work. Okay. All right. Any tips and tricks of just what you do to overcome some of the basic objections? Like, obviously, if you set the table properly, you're not going to get many objections. So let's do this. Let's actually back up before we go to objections. Give us your table set of here's what we're going to do today.
Okay. So before I say here's what we're going to do, I'm making myself incredibly credible. So after I've pulled out the why, I'm flipping over my binder and I'm like, okay, here's my state license to let you know that I am certified and regulated by the state of Arizona to go over all this information with you. Okay. That license number that I gave you on the phone and I circle it, I'm like, if you were to look me up online, you would find me as a registered professional here. And then I just let them look at it and they're like, okay, cool. I'm like, if you want to take a picture of that, by all means, we're going to go over some sensitive pieces of information today. So I just wanted you to have mine. And then I'll flip it over and I'll talk about like the carriers. So it's basically what I just said. As I first say, like, okay, hey, so good thing for you. I am an underwriter and a broker. So both are great for you in your situation. The underwriting piece of me, you probably recognize the majority of these companies. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Most will recognize, and I'll point to Gerber because everybody knows Gerber. So I'll point to the baby and I'll be like, most recognize the baby. They kind of laugh. And so then that being said, I'm like, okay, so I know the underwriting of all these companies. So with that being said, I know based off what you tell me for your age, your health, your habits, what you will and won't qualify for most likely. So with that being said, I'm going to help you do the shopping around of realistically, Jamie, where you are and are not going to qualify for. The broker piece of me, I'm not biased to anyone. I'm just doing what's best for you and your family. So whichever one is going to be best for you, that is exactly what I'm going to go with. Then they are all A+A rated carriers. Obviously, there's thousands of different other insurance carriers out there. But these are all the A+A rated carriers. If they were ANA rated, I would have already been working with them. So that being said, they've been around for 50 to 100 years. They're not going anywhere. Okay. So the last thing is all these programs are regulated by the state. No matter where we apply to you for, they're all going to be about the same price. Does that make sense? And
That
then
makes sense.
so I'm going to make them nod. If they kind of look at me sideways, I'm like, okay, what are you not sure about?
Mhm.
And so then after that, I go through like the little bottom portion. This is what I do. Boom, boom, boom. And then right after that, I go, okay, so Jamie, here's what we are going to do today. So what we're going to do is we are going to submit a request for coverage. I would like to approve you, but unfortunately, I'm just the middleman. They don't give me that kind of power. I'm sure, as you know, they're the ones that make the final decision. And everybody nods with me at that point. They're like, oh yeah, no, I totally get it. So with that being said, I'm always like, so I say that whole thing, and sorry, I just had someone come home. But I say that whole thing, and then they're nodding with me. And so I'm like, okay, so part of the application, the good thing is we don't have to do like the blood draws, the urine samples. It's a really long drawn out process. So what they do need to make sure that, there's no fraud being committed. Obviously you don't want to be scammed and the companies don't want to be scammed. Okay. And so with that being said, they're going to need 3 pieces of information. The first is your social to make sure it is in fact you who is requesting this kind of coverage on yourself. That way it can get paid out to the right people. Okay. And then they like nod. And then I say, okay. And then the second thing is they're going to pair that with your bank information. Make sure you have no prior insurance fraud going on. I doubt it, and then they're like, oh yeah, no. And so then I say, I doubt it, but it all has to line up as you, as Jamie Chirio. So your social and your bank information, it has to line up as in fact you, because you can't use someone else's information. The last thing is your MIB report. That is the Medical Information Bureau. So they have predominantly any meds that you've taken within the last 10 years. And that's how they pull their decision for where they are going to get you covered or where they are not going to. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So at this point in time, they have me fill out a client suitability sheet. I'm going to take about 2 minutes to ask some medication questions, about 2 minutes to ask some financial questions. And the reason for that is if I don't know where you're at on a month-to-month basis, I don't know how to best serve you. I don't know where to best place you. I don't know how to help this make it fit on a budget because it has to make financial sense. They're all nodding with me. And then at the end, I say, if, last thing is any insurance you may or may not have. And then from there, I'll pull a couple options. You'll tell me what's the most comfortable, potentially on a month-to-month basis. We'll submit a request. They're going to tell me yes or no as quickly as 24, 48 hours, as slow as a week, week and a half. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. So all I need right now is just a valid driver's license and an ID. And then I just go right into it.
I love it. I love it. So it's all calm and controlled, and it's not some fancy sales presentation. I mean, there was a lot of we did a couple different scenarios there, so that could seem like it was a little more complicated than it actually is. If you really break that down, guys, all that she did was she sat down and she figured out, why am I here? Why did you fill that out? That's the most important thing. And before she moved on to anything else, she wanted to make sure she pulled that out of me. And when she pulled that out of me, then she just simply revoiced back to me what I told her. It's like, so basically what I'm hearing is you filled this out because you wanted to make sure if you pass away, your wife's going to be taken care of and, your family's not going to be left with any burdens. Correct? Correct. Okay, perfect. Now we're moving on. So you find out why they filled it out. You revoice back to them why they filled it out. And then you say, okay, perfect. Here's who I am. I'm a broker. I'm an underwriter. I'm non-captive. However, here's what we do. You can go through the credibility sheet. Everybody has their own little song and dance of who I am. I say it a little bit different than Casey. Casey says a little bit different than Mike. We all say it a little bit different, but why I'm here, revoice back to them why you're here, who I am, and what we're going to do today. Very simple. And then as soon as you get through, here's what we're going to do today, you set all the expectations, you set the table of here's what we're going to do today. And if you do that well, you'll overcome like 99% of objections, and you won't get the think about it at the end because you've already overcame in the beginning. We're not going to think about it today because we can't even make a decision. The insurance company has to make a decision on you. So I love that. Well, we still got time, so we can respect everybody's time. Let's dig into some agency building stuff. So you've obviously gone and you've hit senior sales manager. You got your new logo, FFL Zealous, which is dope. One of my favorite logos for sure. And that's $100,000 in a month. So that means that Casey's helped her agents earn over $100,000 in commissions in a month, and she's continuing to move forward. I guess when you're talking to new prospective agents, like what are like a couple of things, like reasons why, we always say, hashtag best business ever. Like what are some reasons why you think FFL is the best business ever, and, you know, things that are attractive to the people that you're talking to?
So the biggest thing, and we're not going to lie, everybody's attracted to the money, right? Like they see that and they think all my problems are going to go away. You know what I mean? So, but at the same time, I make it known, I want to know why in the world you want to do this. Like, why do you actually, and if it's for the money, that's okay, but there's got to be a bigger reason why. So when I'm talking to people, I'm trying to figure out where they're really at, like hear their side of things, like what their actual why is. And then I am not afraid to lay it out to them that this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I will tell them that straight up. I'm like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it is the most rewarding thing I have ever done. And so I'll tell them, I'm like, I'm not playing around. I will not sugarcoat with you. Any questions that you ask me, I will tell you straight up. And so I'm trying to do them a service of being like, I'm not going to sugarcoat everything for you. If it's all rainbows and butterflies, because it's not. I've literally said this to people. I'm like, why do you think you wouldn't need to work like a 6-figure income earner and like half do it? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, why do you think you deserve 6 figures if you're not going to work like you make 6 figures? So to me, that's what I think is, I'm like, we're not going to half do work. So, you know, I tell them that, and I'm like, there is a lot of hours required in this job. And so I'll help them figure out what goes on. Cause some people are young, single, they're go-getters, that's just what they want to do. And then some people have a family they have to feed. So they've got to kind of work around some schedules like that. So biggest thing when I'm recruiting, obviously people are attracted to the money, and I'm like, okay, so this is realistically what needs to happen and what's going to happen. And then I tell them, I'm like, ask me a billion questions. If you don't feel like you're annoying, you're doing it wrong. Like, and that's true. Cause I know some people are like, I don't want to bother them, but you're really hurting yourself because you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And then you continue to not know what you don't know because you don't ask. So with that being said, like, I tell them to ask me a ton of questions. I'm your lifeline right now. So if you need anything, I'll direct them to a contracting manager. I'm like, hey, this is where you ask questions. I get them plugged in. I'm like, here's the group me, hop on all the training calls. I'm reaching out to them. How's it going? Like that sort of thing. So biggest thing, I know they're attracted to the money, but I'm also like, I do caution them that I'm like, this job it's simple, but it is hard. Like it can be challenging at times. And sometimes it can be the easiest thing ever. Everybody sits with you. They want it all. And you get $10,000 in a day. And you're like, what just happened? Like that happens too. So with that being said, that's how I approach it. I'm very upfront and forward about like, this isn't going to be easy, but if you work at it, you're going to make money. You're going to be successful. You're going to be just fine. But if you don't know something, ask me a question, reach out to a top producer, stay plugged in, like that sort of thing. So that's kind of how.
I mean, I've heard Zach Tardowski, he talked about it on one of the podcasts. He's like, if you want to be a doctor who makes, 450 to 700 grand a year, you go to school for 8, 10, 12 years, you do residency, you spend all this extra time, you spend extra money, you pretty much spend all this time away from your family to be able to get to this point where you earn, high 6-figure income. And then people will come in here and they want to earn doctor type of money without putting in doctor type of effort. Doctor went to school for however many years, residency for however many years, and people come here and they expect, oh, because I saw so-and-so earned this in their first month, I could totally do that too. But they didn't put in the same effort as that person who behind the scenes went out there and, did everything they needed to do. And I also do the exact same thing. I tell people, hey, almost in the exact same words, this is one of the hardest things I've ever done, but one of the most worthwhile things that I've ever done. It's very simple to do. It's also very simple not to do. What's simple to do is also simple not to do. And most people won't. I think it's really, really important that people understand that. So I guess, what final words of advice would you have to somebody who is just on the edge of going all in?
Oh, you're going to continuously wonder what you could have accomplished until you do. You're going to sit there and have your toes on the edge, toes on the edge, toes on the edge. Chances are, if you're a toes on the edge kind of person, unless someone pushes you into the water, it's a sink or swim kind of thing. So that's really truly, like when I said I gave myself a non-negotiable, of course I'm scared. I've never done anything like this. I've never done fully commission based. I don't know what to say to these people. You know what I mean? When I first go in, I'm like, Henry has like 26 meds. I'm like, I don't know if, I'm like freaking out, but you are always going to wonder what you could have done and what you could have accomplished. And you will probably have a regret when this opportunity was placed in front of you until you give it your all. Like people have said, if you get 3 months in and you did everything possible, you dialed your life away, you asked a ton of questions, you did all this, and you still didn't make money, which I doubt. You still didn't make money, but with that being said, then you can at least say, I gave it everything I had. I gave it everything I had, and maybe it just wasn't my thing. But you need to give it a very valid effort. And I don't say that you try 2 dial days and you're like, oh, this is the hardest thing ever, I didn't get it. No, you keep going until you get better. Jamie did not start out the way that he dials. I did not start out the way that I dial. I had to have my butt handed to me so many times over dial day and heard so many I'm not interested and not know how to overcome it until I had to figure it out. So that's the biggest thing that I would say. You're always going to wonder until you do it.
Yeah. Don't want to live with regret. And I think that the theme that I heard there is that top producers, constant and never ending improvement, always constant and never ending improvement. You're looking for feedback. You're being vulnerable and you're putting yourself out there to tell people how you failed, and you're looking for feedback to get better. If you're a private person, if you're somebody that is prideful, that doesn't want to ask for help, you're going to struggle here. And it's going to be slow and painful death on your way out of this business. And I don't want to be dramatic, but if you're prideful and you don't ask for help, it's going to be slow and painful. Or you can just get it over with, have somebody, for instance, listen to you dial your leads live. I promise you, if you actually call a top producer and you say, hey, I recorded myself dialing live, will you give me some feedback? If maybe you're afraid to jump on live dials and unmute yourself, you just send someone a recording of you. If you get on live dials, if you call us after you leave the home and you ask for feedback, we'll tell you exactly what works, what doesn't work, how you can improve. But if you try to do this on your own, this is a very lonely business. If you dial alone, if you go out in the field alone, you're not booking enough appointments. It's very, very lonely. You got to do this business together. You got to stay plugged into the groups. You got to stay plugged into the live dials, getting into an office, whatever that is, and constantly and never ending improvement. So that's my last major key for you. So Casey, any final words before we go?
Just like, I look up to Jamie in so many ways because he leads by example. You have a great leader and you have other producers on your team that lead by example and do very well. Like exactly echoing what Jamie just said, just reach out for help. They're not going to look down on you. If anything, they really, really want to help you. So keep pushing and just keep going. Like most of the time people are right next to a victory and they stop because it's been so hard, whatever. Like you are going to go through ups and downs. You just are, as is life. So you keep going. You don't just stop living life. You know what I mean? You just keep going. And then also think perspective of what else would you be doing that you're going to make this amount of money? What everything else is going to be hard too. So you might as well do something that's maybe a little bit harder. If it is, for some people it's not, but it might be at the beginning, something that might be a little bit more challenging, but you make like 10 times the amount. So that's like kind of my final piece is just keep it all in perspective and just ask a boatload of questions.
Thank you so much, Casey. We really appreciate you. The feedback I'm getting in our group text. Everybody thinks you absolutely lit it up like we knew you would. So thank you so much for joining us. Everybody have an amazing night. Comment in the chat. Whatever you want to comment, just thanking Casey for being on the call. So we appreciate you, Casey. Everybody have an absolutely amazing night and we'll talk to y'all soon. Peace out, guys.